noontime here in Boston. So just want to do a sound check. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, everybody is muted, so I'm probably the only one that can respond to you.
Thank you for responding. That feels so good. I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I am currently the executive director for a program in the Boston area called Horizons for Homeless Children. We actually do a few things. We run 3 early childhood programs that are a 2-generation model. So when children enroll in our early childhood program, the families enroll in a program called Mobility Mentoring, where they are assigned a coach who they then work with on a program called Mobility Mentoring, and that was designed by Empath. And through that program, they set goals and work towards building a sustainable life for their families. So whatever that means, it could mean a number of different things for them and their families. And then we also run a program in shelters throughout Massachusetts called Play Spaces. So we go into the shelter, we work with the shelter to partner with them, find a space within the shelter to set up a playroom, and then find volunteers to man that space. And yeah, so that's a little bit about the work we do. I've been in the field for a long, long time, about 30 some odd years. And the last 4 or 5 strictly focused on the homeless population. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about just the basics of child development and why those early years are so important for children and for their future. So I am just going to try my slides. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so today I'm hoping you're going to walk away with a better understanding of how to build a brain, homelessness, and then what that means and does towards the development of brain function for young children, what toxic stress is, and then we're going to move on to some of the positives, how to mitigate some of the effects of trauma, and then how to look at building resilience in children and families. So to start off, I'm actually going to show you just a quick video. And this is a lot of the information we use is out of the Developing Child at Harvard, the Center for the Developing Child, and we find their information quite useful in the work we do.
Hey, Sheila, looks like there might be some issues with the video.
Okay. Could you all raise your hands if you're having issues with the video?
It looks like all hands are being raised. So what we can do, instead of maybe watching the video now, is in our follow-up, we can send a link to the video.
Okay. I have several videos in the presentation. All right. All right. Plan B is, so basically what there's in that video is it talks about the importance of starting the brain off right. And in the first 2 years, there are synapses that have to be formed. And if they're not formed, what that means to the long-term development of the child. So some of the key important steps in building those synapses come through very basic principles. And one of the key things is relationships with another person. It's called serve and return. So I don't know, a lot of us naturally, when we see a baby, we smile, the baby smiles back to us. And there's this back and forth that goes on between you and the baby. Very low level basic, but those interactions are really forming key brain structure for that baby. So part of the work that's so important in the development of children is just provided in the principles of play. So looking for to provide a safe and supportive environment where children can really explore and do their research, and that's how they learn best, is just through simple exploration and discovery. And then providing children with the opportunity to develop and enhance and maintain developmental milestones, and I'll go into some of those in a minute. Foster connections with peers and adults. Those social connections, again, are so important in developing those strong synapses in early brain development. Promoting self-confidence and positive self-esteem, and then buffering the effects of trauma and toxic stress. So Albert Einstein describes play as the highest form of research for children. Okay, sorry guys. Here we go. So from birth to 3 months, just some basic things that you need to remember for babies is they develop some physical skills and raising their head and chest when on their stomach, stretching and kicking on back, opening and shutting their hands, bringing their hands to the mouth, and grasping and shaking toys. They also develop some basic social skills. They begin to develop the smile. They enjoy playing with people. They become more communicative, more expressive with face and body. They imitate some movements and expressions. So if you smile at a baby, you think they're smiling back. And when you open your mouth, they'll open their mouth. And they also have a lot of sensory milestones. And again, these are so important in the brain development. So they're able to track. So if you hold a toy and move it to the right or left, the baby will start tracking that toy. Oh, I see a typo. Recognizing familiar objects and people. Start using their hands and eyes in coordination. They have a strong smell preference, believe it or not, and prefer the sense of soft as opposed to coarse. So some of these things, it's interesting, you really see a strong effect in children living in shelter. We find when babies start in our program, a lot of times their physical skills are way behind their peers. And that's often due to the fact that they really don't have the space to play, and the importance of giving them the physical space. Even a simple area on the floor where a baby can roll and develop a lot of those gross motor skills is so important. So some of the environment things that we make sure we set up are safe experiences for those infants. They're totally dependent upon adults, so dependable adults to be present with those children. The time and space and environment to explore all their senses. Babies often love to give the taste test. So the environment is set up. Oh, I'm not sure why that happened. The environment is set up with soft mats, some structures for them to try to climb and move through and around. Lots of spacious floor area. There's usually a crib area where they can rest and recharge their batteries. Soft music. Make sure it's shoeless so that they is a safe place for the babies to crawl around in. And then daily routines are so important. Keeping babies on their individual schedules as far as meals and naps and diapering and time to play. So the most important things they're going to learn at that age is socialization and positive interactions with adults that promote their ability to trust. And this really helps in the development of self-regulation skills. So really helping a baby figure out what they need, responding to that, using verbal cues to help them through situations when they're upset, and helping to try to learn their language, so whatever that means. Generally, when you're very in tune with the babies, you learn the hungry cry, the wet diaper cry, the I'm exhausted cry, and then how to help them self-soothe and self-regulate to meet those needs that they're demanding at that moment. So providing many opportunities for serve and return interactions, which is key to their brain development, and making sure they have time to develop their body strength through the use of tummy time. Next is toddlers. So these guys are generally 18 months up until about 2 years, 9 months. These children start developing some physical skills, so they walk. They begin pulling toys behind them when they walk. They slowly start to run. They're able to stand on their tippy toes to reach things and kick a ball. These children also really start developing some strong social skills. They love to parrot and imitate what's going on around them. Very beginning the self-awareness that they're separate from others, especially the adults in their lives. So they're practicing what that means as far as their independence. So no is a favorite word at that age. And they're very enthusiastic to have other children nearby. They don't necessarily realize they're children, but that's another whole conversation that we could have. And then they do develop some deep cognitive thinking. They can find objects even when they're hidden, 2 or 3 levels deep. So a real sense of object permanence, that just because an object is out of sight doesn't mean it's completely disappeared. They're able to start sorting things by shape and color, and they have a huge imagination, so can really love to pretend. And if you walk into any toddler classroom, they'll be happy to make you breakfast over in the housekeeping area. So that's a very enjoyable time in their life. So in meeting the needs of the children at this time, make sure there's lots of room and space for them to use expressive language and to really engage and share with others. They thrive on being independent, so really setting up an environment where they can be the drivers of their own bus. They really need to make a lot of choices and decisions for themselves. Oh my goodness, here we go again. They do have strong emotions, so really helping them figure out those emotions and label those emotions, and start learning those self-regulation skills. So when they're feeling the strong emotions, how can they display them in a positive way? Children at this age love to draw, and make sure you have lots of pictures on the walls and things for them to look at. This is the start of some some independent learning areas within the classroom. So literacy and arts and crafts, a dramatic play area, some manipulatives and blocks, and we started introducing the circle time routine for them. Again, these children thrive on routine, so making sure that it's always the same type of day with meals and naps at regular times, and they start toilet training at this age, and really sometimes have a tough time with transitions, so really helping them develop some good routines around their transitions. Their play is what we call parallel play, where they're playing next to one another, not really strongly interacting with one another, but enjoy each other as more of a play thing than a real person. Love to read the same book and sing the same song over and over and over again. Gross motor play, really challenging them in ways that they weren't challenged before, so increasing balance exercises. Excuse me. They love to learn to jump, jumping on 2 feet, and then encouraging them to try jumping on 1 foot. And you can't ever have too many sensory activities for toddlers, so making sure there's painting available and water play, and Play-Doh isn't listed on here, but Play-Doh is definitely a favorite at that age. Then we go on to our preschoolers. So those guys are about 3s and 4s. And this is where they are really becoming very interactive. So these children are very physical, love to climb, able to walk up and down stairs with alternating feet, can kick a ball well, run, beginning to learn how to pedal a tricycle, and can actually bend over without falling. The toddlers have a more challenging time with that skill. They're able to imitate adults and playmates when they're developing their social skills. They really can show affection for familiar playmates, so they can call a name out when their friend walks in the room. They're able to take turns, and at the older end of preschool, rules become very, very important. So making sure that you're following the rules and that you're consistent in your rules. Definitely understands mine, his, and hers. And then really developing their cognitive thinking skills, so they can make mechanical toys work. They're able to match an object in hand to a picture book, play make-believe, sort, and complete a 3 to 4 piece puzzle. And they can understand the concept of 2. 1 for you and 1 for me makes 2. So here we really try to set up a social and cooperative environment, so children are working together on projects, whether that even be solving problems with a friend, and self-regulation strategies. So when they're able to start labeling their feelings, they're able to start figuring out how they can display those feelings in socially acceptable ways. They're extremely curious at this age and can really understand group expectations. So rules are very important at this age. So making sure that the environment has lots of documentation of learning samples, that the center rules are posted and everybody knows, and they love to be helpers. So making sure you incorporate that into the daily routine, that there's a helper. Again, the routines are so important. They know the class routines, make sure they're posted and followed, meals, rest time, diapering. They're forming really close relationships with the peers, so encouraging those and helping the children who are more shy, able to think about how to develop relationships. They love pretend and dramatic play, especially testing the realities, participating in more creative, focused, and cooperative games. It's interesting at this age, a lot of times in dramatic play, if there's a mom who's just had a baby, you'll see that reenacted in the dramatic play area, or and unfortunately with our kids, we see all sorts of things reenacted in the dramatic play area, but they're very, very able to work through and kind of process the things that are happening in their world with the use of that pretend play area. So that area, again, is really important to children who've been involved in trauma as a space where they can process and figure out some of the things that are going on in their worlds. So this, I have another video, but again, it goes on to talk about the brain. Maybe I'll try one more time, Tish, to see if that will, let's try it one more time to see if I can get it to work.
Okay. I think we're having the same issue.
All right. Sorry, everyone. But I would really encourage you, the links are on the presentation, and it's really helpful to just understand all of the importance of the environment and what's going on in a child's life in the building of their brain. And sorry, I'm just trying to get my presentation back. What that an estimated 180,413 people in families were identified as homeless. That's a lot of people, and the problem I know in the Boston area is getting, those numbers are getting higher and higher as opposed to going lower. And what that means to families, actually some of the causes of homelessness, again, it's intergenerational poverty, lack of affordable housing, which is really an issue here in Boston. We have a lot of gentrification going on, and the areas that used to be affordable are no longer affordable. Many of our families experience domestic violence and are fleeing a safe, comfortable place because of domestic violence. Some are not able to work on their education, so they're economically challenged due to lack of education. The decrease of governmental support. We also see a lot of substance abuse and mental illness, and then a lack of a social support system within their family. So when the families enter homelessness, they're really losing a lot: possessions, community, routines, privacy, security, and their dignity, worst of all. So some of the effects: children without a home are twice as likely as poor but housed children to experience hunger, which often leads to poor health, higher rates of asthma, ear infections, stomach problems, and speech problems. Chronic homelessness is also associated with children's mental health problems, particularly internalizing disorders. So we see a lot of anxiety, depression, social withdrawal, hunger, threats to physical safety, lack of social support, and the unavailability of adequate shelter facilities may also compromise the mother's capacity to respond fully and adequately to her child's needs. And all of this is usually the cause of a toxic, stressful environment for the family. So when faced with the reminders of traumatic experience, children's brains and bodies are programmed to go into the automatic flight, fight, or freeze response mode. So we were looking at some of the ways that you can build that brain and the importance of building those synapses. But when faced with trauma, a lot of times that those brain synapses then are not forming. So if the child's going to flight, fight, or freeze, a lot of times there's a tendency to misunderstand or mislabel the children's behavior. So these children are often labeled as disruptive or withdrawn, they're just shy. So it's really important to realize the story behind the child in order to fully understand their behavior. So some of the behaviors that children with trauma may exhibit are, there's two pools, right? Some are externalizing behavior, so they startle easy. They often act out and are extremely aggressive to other children or adults. Could be very destructive. They're knocking down everybody's block structures. They're pulling pictures off the wall. Tend to be impulsive, often labeled as hyperactive or ADD children, where they're really just dealing with the impact of trauma. Have sudden bursts of anger, and some are prone to self-injury. And then we have other children who just completely withdraw, are often sad. They are often tired, complain of being tired or can't sleep, fearful. They have a hard time concentrating and may even just avoid you altogether. So they're the child that sometimes gets overlooked, especially in a classroom situation, because they tend to be well behaved and just kind of go with the flow, but they're really just avoiding any attention whatsoever. So behavior shows itself in lots of different ways. Sometimes you can really see and hear anger and it's very obvious. Other times it's under the radar and you don't see it and you don't hear it, but it's still there percolating. So I think one of the other important things that we think about is being sensitive to trauma does not mean that we're attributing all behaviors to trauma, but instead choosing to intentionally proceed with awareness and understanding the possibility of trauma-related factors. So really not saying, oh, he just experienced trauma, so that's why he's running around the room like a wild man, but and forgiving the child for that behavior, but instead really thinking about what is that trauma doing to that child and how can we help them overcome that trauma, and then figure out how their behavior then is affecting everyone else in the room. So really giving them the skills they need. So when a child is acting out, the acronym we use for that is everybody eats. So generally it's they escape the situation, they seek attention, they need some tangible result or response, or they need a sensory experience. And that helps them through whatever is triggering that emotion for them. So there's all different ways that you can respond to behavior, and how you respond to the behavior really has an impact on what you will then see further down the road. So if you, some people think, oh, if you just ignore it, it will stop. Well, yeah, sometimes it does, but other times it can then escalate into something else. So some of the things that that we focus on is thinking about how to coach the kids into right behavior more than disciplining them for the wrong behavior. So this is kind of around the use of timeout or behavior modification programs. That you're definitely stopping a behavior, but what's the long-term outcome for behavior that's just stopped, especially when we're talking about kids with trauma, and what else could you do instead? So we actually have embraced the pyramid model. And the pyramid model really looks at what the child is doing, what are their triggers, and what is it that you could do in that moment to give the child some socially acceptable ways to work through that trigger. So instead of just modifying a behavior or helping a child um, modify a behavior, really giving them the tools to look at what's going on deep within them, think about it, and think about what they could do instead. So some of our children come to us, say they've experienced a terrible tragedy in their lives, and a ambulance was involved in the outcome of that. Sometimes when they just hear that ambulance sound, that then triggers a response with them. So they might have an outburst. Just a teacher running a normal classroom might not even hear that siren. You know, if you hear a million sirens a day, you don't necessarily hear that. So might be then attributing that trigger to something totally separate, you know, or that behavior to some totally separate incident. So really, it takes a lot of observation and deep look into what's going on. So we do a lot of journaling and tracking of children's behavior to match up behaviors and displays from those behaviors. So it's really important that all children at some level of learning learn how to self-regulate, meet their needs, and manage their relationships. And we find if you do that in the first 5 years, it really makes their success for public school so much more positive. Because this is the time where they really can have the space and environment to help them through some of those behaviors before they get too out of control. So some of the things that we do is it's asking children permission to offer assistance. So, can I play with you? Would you like me to help you tie your shoe? Would you like to read a book? So building a trusting relationship with children is really important. And in playing, you're building that trust and you're building that relationship with the child, which, going back to that brain development, again, is so important. And the people in these children's lives really do make a difference, and how you respond and react to behaviors makes a huge difference and can have a lasting impact on them. Harvard has come out with the 3 principles to improve outcomes for children and families. And really, number 1 is supporting a responsive relationship. So that serve and return interaction really enables children to build resilience. So if they have a person that they can count on, every child needs a champion. So if they have one person in their life who's got them, and really they know that that person is there for them and will always be there for them, no matter who it is, if it's the teacher, if it's the bus driver, if it's the janitor, if it's the parent, then that will really help them build the resilience they need to improve their outcomes. Strengthening the core life skills, and the 2 core life skills are executive function and self-regulation. Executive function is the skill needed to get from point A to point B. So it really helps. The program we run for our parents called the Mobility Mentoring. It really helps them think about a long-term goal and then how to break that down into smaller goals. So you can even start that skill development at a very young age. You know, sitting down in the dramatic play area with the toddler. Oh, you're going to make me breakfast? What are you going to make me for breakfast? What do we need in order to make eggs for breakfast? Do you have an egg? Do you have a pot? Do you have so helping them think of an overall task and then breaking it down into movable steps is really important. And again, self-regulation. If you're feeling that, you seem like you're feeling very angry, what could you do? What could help you through that? It seems like you're really frustrated trying to put that puzzle piece in. What else could you do in order to try different ways to do that? And then the other important thing to improve outcomes for children and families is reducing the sources of stress in a child's life. So reducing the sources of stress for the child and, of course, for the adult. So if you do that for the adult, they're better able to provide those responsive relationships for the children. So making sure that the adults are taking good care of themselves. We use the plane analogy a lot. And, when the plane is about to crash, the pilot comes on and wants you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, right? Before you put it on your child. Because if you're not living and breathing and able to take care of your child, then there's no sense in you can't then be there for your child. So reducing the sources of stress will also help with your long-term health issues and the long-term health issues for the child. So there's been lots of studies about how stress really affects your body functioning, and starts with brain development and moves into all sorts of other things, heart and lung function, obesity. It's shown to really do have lasting impacts on health and development of people. So understanding a child's story is so important. Knowing, who has had traumatic stress or a traumatic event in their life and what that toxicity may have done to the child, and then highlighting their strengths that will help foster their resilience and empower their future. So it's really important to figure out what kids, have the health, who has the ADD and who really has had a traumatic experience and just needs help in working through those things. So I think that brings us to the end. So I don't know if we have some questions or.
Thank you, Sheila. We haven't had any come through the chat yet. But as an after webinar, we do, for all you attendees, we will have a Slack channel. So we're going to go through a couple of slides here, Sheila, if you don't mind kind of bouncing through them for us. To explain to everyone what Slack is and how that works. Would you mind heading on to them?
Yes. So I'm sorry. Tell me one more time what happened to the webinar and how we continue. So go to the next slide.
Yes, please.
Okay. Hopefully it will go. There we go.
Okay, so Slack, for you that don't know, it is a collaborative hub. So what it is, it's kind of like a WhatsApp app or a Google Hangout chat room where you can go and have some deeper conversations, have a broader discussion, ask questions, have that follow-up conversation and be able to ask it all in one spot. There's a lot of organizations right now that are really going towards Slack as their email communication, but it's a great real time, and it records and shows history of everything that is put into the channel. So even if you aren't active right away, you can always go back and look at other questions other people have asked. Next slide, please. So with that, we put a link in your chat box to the Slack channel. It's going to walk you through what it looks like to join. So you're going to click the link, you're going to enter your email address, check your email, make sure that you get that verification. It might ask you to put in a password. You create a password of your own. It's for your own account for that. And then you'll be able to be logged in right into our Slack channel. So you will have, you'll see a couple channels on the left side of your screen, which on the next slide I'll show you kind of what that looks like. And all the communications for this one will be in the hashtag Child Development 101. So in this screenshot, you see that there's channels, and the channels listed, there'll be a general that you'll automatically be enrolled in, which is just general questions about anything related to NACCE. And the Child Development 101 is where Sheila will be active just after this webinar for about 30 minutes or so, and they'll be checking in throughout the week to make sure that there's questions are answered for anyone that has any questions around this webinar or child development related issues for that. If you go to the next slide for me. I see some of you are already starting to join and clicking that link. So if you hear the dings on my computer, it's because my notifications are set up. So once you're in here, this slide talks a little bit about how frequently we'll be involved in there. So not only will Sheila be in there, but a couple of others of us from the NACCE Professional Development Committee will be in as well to help answer some of those questions. Next slide, please. A way you can always get back to this is if you just, once you're in, if you type in your address bar and your web address, the naccetalks.slack.com, you'll be able to get to this page as well. This slide here will show you how to set up your notifications. So under your little drop-down arrow next to NACCE Talks, you'll click on Preferences. From Preferences, you can enable those desktop notifications or email notifications as well for that. Next slide, please. So with that, if you have questions, please feel free for the next few minutes to type them in the chat box or type them right into Slack. But we're going to go ahead and kind of transition to that in the next few minutes. We truly thank Sheila for hosting this webinar for us today and giving us some child development background and information and how we can better serve those students that are experiencing trauma as their younger ages and up through preschool. So thank you so much, Sheila.
You're so welcome. I'm so sorry those videos did not work for us.
That's okay. We've posted the PowerPoint here in the webinar along with it is in the Slack channel, right where everybody can see it there too and be able to download it. And then make sure as you're making comments and doing things within the Slack, if you want it to be in child development, you go ahead and switch your channel over to child development from general. All right, well, thank you guys so much. We'll go ahead and we will end here and move questions over to the to Slack. I see there is a question about CEUs. That is definitely something we're going to look into. As of right now, we don't have the CEUs attached to our webinars, but we'll look into it and see if that's something we can provide for future. So thank you all so much for attending.
Thanks, everyone.